To the evening session. We're going to start this evening session by the reintroduction of commissioners and staff. Roger.
I'm Roger Marshall from Great Bend.
Tom Dill, Salina.
I'm Gerald Lauber from Topeka.
Robert Wilson from Pittsburgh.
Randy Dahl, Leon.
Don Budd, Kansas City.
Sheila Camus, Commission Secretary.
Linda Craighead, Topeka.
Keith Saxon, Pratt.
Robin Jennison, Topeka.
Chris Thomason, Legal Counsel.
Are you with us, Deborah?
I am Deborah Bolton, Garden City.
Thank you very much. Deborah is vacationing or working or doing something, and she's joining us electronically tonight. And welcome, Deborah.
Thank you.
At this point in time, we would like to invite and welcome any general public comment on non-agenda items. Well, it does make it easier. We'll see if you can yell. It makes it I'll go. They want you down. We want you down here, please.
Okay.
It makes it easier for people who are watching you on the internet.
I'm Bill Rice. I live in Sedgwick, Kansas. And he probably knows me.
Maybe.
Huh? You, well, watch what you say. Okay. What I'm talking about, up at Marion, all the public hunting areas,
Just try to.
okay. All your public hunting area there, up in Durham Cove, last year. Now this is public hunting. The farmer up there, all around Durham Cove there's grass, real down there, always had pheasant and quail in it. All the way around it for 2 years, he has not grown anything on that. That's probably 40 acres. That's good duck hunting. I mean, when they put feed, when they grew stuff on it, but didn't grow a darn thing. Last year, I went up there and walked my dogs through there and dove hunted. There was quail and everything else. They mowed that last year. They mowed every bit of it, of all that grass back there, and baled it. And that pheasant and quail all in there. Okay? Up on the reservoir, up on the river, Fifth Creek Cove, some farmer he put some kind of killer that no grass has grown there for 3 years, and it all run into the river. And up on that's on French Creek Cove there. And nothing's growed for 3 years. He sprayed something on it. No grass or nothing. You go to French Creek Cove, up on the river, on the Solomon. You go up there on the river. And up there north, at the north end, Turkey, what do you got? They got a great big sign. They got a great big sign up there that says turkey habitat. You know what? They burned all of it, and I seen baby pheasants baby turkeys on opening day. They burned all that where I seen them. That guy cut it all. It was wheat stubble all along the river on the east side. But in French Creek Cove, that guy put something on there. Plus, 5 years ago, on French Creek Cove, on the south side, they sprayed something down there and nothing's grown on it for 3 or 4 years. On the river, that all run into the water. That run all into the water. Nothing would grow. And then, in French Creek Cove, across from it, there's a hedgerow run down there for 3 blocks across on French Creek Cove, across the road, which was down. I've seen turkey cross there. They cut all them down 5 years ago, and back over toward the river they cut. There are piles of dead stuff that's been there for about 4 years. And all there is in there is predators. And I haven't seen hardly any turkeys in there, and there used to be a lot of turkeys. But they've got brush piles back in there 5 years, and they haven't been burned. And there's some places on Cheney's getting just as bad. But that's all I got to say.
All right, thank you.
I mean, that's terrible for our lands to be done like that.
Any other public comment? Well, let's start the public hearing. And it looks like we have lots of falconry regulations, and Mike's going to fill us in.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you. It's been a long time coming getting to this vote. It's only been about 3 years, if I remember correctly, that we've been working on this. Just a little bit about what we need to do here. On your agenda, if you look at KAR 115.14.1 through 1410, these are the old regulations that exist right now, and we're going to be voting individually on each of those regulations to revoke those regulations, and they will be replaced by 115.14.11 through 115.14.15. And so I think the best thing to do is probably vote on revoking the old regulations. Then as each of the new ones come up, I'll give a really short, like 2-sentence description of what we're voting on. Basically, we're if you'll remember, we're moving from a system where we have a state permit and a federal permit, and we're going to line up with the new federal regulations, which basically hand over the permitting and the essential administration of falconry to the states. So
I think that would be good. I might point out as we go through these, and probably the other commissioners receive them as well, I believe nearly every permitted falconer sent me a polite email, all of which are in support of these federal regulations. So from the end user, there seems to be a considerable support for this. So why don't we start rolling through as quickly as we can, unless there's any discussion that you anticipate, and we'll start by revoking all of those that. Yes, I understand. So could I have a motion that we revoke KAR 115.14.1?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. If there's no discussion, we'll vote.
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Wait,
Pardon?
is there any discussion and any public comment?
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
KAR 115.14.2 falconry permits to be revoked. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I second it.
Is there any discussion or public comment?
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bud?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
Falconry permit classes and requirements, KAR 115-14-3, to be revoked. May I have a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Any discussion or comment? Vote?
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bud?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
Examination, KAR 115-14-4, to be revoked. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any discussion, public comment? Vote?
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bud?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
7-0 pass.
Facilities and inspection, to be revoked, KAR 115-14-5. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any public comment, any discussion? Vote?
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bud?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
Equipment, KAR 115-14-6, to be revoked. Can I have a motion?
I move to accept.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Any public comment, any discussion? Vote?
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bud?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
Reports, KAR 115-14-8, to be revoked. Can I have a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Public comment, discussion. Vote?
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bud?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
Acquisition of Raptors, KAR 115-14-9, to be revoked. May I have a motion?
I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
I second it.
Any public comment or discussion? Vote?
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bud?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes. Other provisions, KAR 115-14-10, to be revoked. May I have a motion?
I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Public comment, questions? Let's have a vote.
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Bud?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes. That takes care of the provisions to be revoked and everything, and that prior to having some new things. And I want to point out that if there was if I viewed this as having any issues of any controversy, I probably would slow this down. At our last meeting at Cabela's, in an effort to get through in time, one sports writer commented that I sounded like an auctioneer, and it was some truth to that, trying to get done by 9 o'clock, to which I think in the future, we're not going to have any meetings where we can't be longer than that. I don't like doing business that way. I don't mind breezing through falconry, and I suppose why do I not care about falcons and care more about other things, but I make those comments. Now we have some new provisions that will probably be eerily similar to the old provisions, but KAR 115-14-11. Mike, you want to tell us what the general provisions are in a nutshell?
Sure. 1411, this new permanent reg establishes general provisions for falconry. The regulation includes provisions from both federal regulations, state regulations. The provisions include hunting license requirements, take of certain species, abatement activities, feather disposal, carcass disposal, conservation education programs, rehabilitation, and hunting seasons.
Okay, anybody have any questions before we vote? Then I'd like a motion that we approve KAR 115-1411. Oh, I thought,
I think you have to make the offer to comply with it.
beforehand, before we vote. Does anybody have any comments before we start beginning to vote? Then I would like to have, did I get a motion?
So moved.
I second, Mr. Chairman.
All right, been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or public comment? Let's have a vote.
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawler?
Yes.
Passed 7-0.
All right, falconry permits, applications, examination, new regulation, KAR 115-1412. Any comments before we vote on that? Okay, Mike, you want to explain what it is, maybe?
Yes. This new permanent regulation establishes permits, applications, and examinations for falconry. The provisions include application provisions, dates, permits are valid, transfer of permits into the state, or transfer of raptors into the state, lapsed permits, temporary permits, permit levels, and permit denial, suspension, or revocation.
Could I have a motion that we approve KAR 115-1412?
Move for approval.
I second, Mr. Chairman.
Any public comment, any discussion? Hearing none, let's vote.
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawler?
Yes. Falconry facilities, equipment, care requirements, inspection, new regulation. Mike?
Okay, this would be 1413. This new permanent reg establishes facilities, equipment, care requirements, and inspections for falconry. The provisions include facility definitions, minimum facility requirements, transport requirements, minimum equipment requirements, temporary facilities, training, and facility inspections.
Any questions on this one? Can I have a motion that KAR 115-1413 be approved?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any comment? Hearing none, let's vote.
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawler?
Yes.
Passed 7-0.
Taking, handling, transporting, and possessing raptors, KAR 115-1414. Any comments? Mike, you want to discuss?
Sure. 1414, this new permanent rig establishes taking, banding, transporting, and possessing raptors for falconry. The provisions include hunting license requirements, capture devices, permission from the landowner, number of raptors that may be taken, threatened or endangered species, reporting take of raptors, recapture of raptors, identification of raptors taken, and release of raptors.
Any questions, any comments? Could I have a motion for approval of 115-1414?
So moved.
I second, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion? And hearing none.
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes. KAR 115-1415, falconry transfers, trading, and sale of raptors. Any comments from anybody? Mike, you want to give us a nutshell explanation of that one?
Yes, sir. This new permanent regulation establishes facilities, equipment, care requirements, and inspections for falconry. The provisions include transfer of raptors, prohibiting the sale of wild-caught raptors, marking of transferred raptors, and reporting of transferred raptors.
Any comments? May I have a motion for approval?
I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Any additional discussion or comment? And hearing none.
Commissioner Bolton,
Yes.
Commissioner Bud,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
Now, Mike, since you have probably won the prize in both new regulations and revocations, why don't you discuss the wildlife rehabilitation permit?
Okay. In 115.18.1, this permanent regulation establishes the application, reporting, and general provisions for a wildlife rehabilitation permit. What this does is extend the possession period for holding of raptors for rehabilitation to coordinate with the falconry regulations. This coordinates the federal, our state holding period of 180 days with the federal of 180 days and makes it all the same.
So this is another falconry-related regulation.
The change is
The
falconry
change is
related.
falconry
Right.
related. Any comments from anybody? May I have a motion that we approve KAR 115.18.1?
I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Any additional discussion? Let's vote.
Commissioner Bolton,
Yes.
Commissioner Bud,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
The agency has put a lot of work into rewriting these falconry rules, and it's been a long, drawn-out process. I think it's been appreciated by the end users, although they're a small group. I think they have appreciated it. So you're very welcome, and I appreciate the emails and the cordial tone, my preferred type of emails. Speaking of cordial tones, Mr. Abidrowski, this may not be quite as quick and as big a formality, so let's see what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. The following is an update in the development of season dates and limits for general duck and goose seasons, including staff considerations for the 2012-2013 waterfowl season.
Let's watch the PowerPoint.
Sit in the comfy chair.
Sorry. Thank you. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service established frameworks from which states can develop migratory game bird hunting seasons. The federal frameworks provide bag limit and possession limits, season length, the earliest and latest dates for which a season can be held within. The states can be more restrictive, but however not more liberal than the federal frameworks. And the frameworks are developed in a cooperative process through the Flyway System and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Service Regulation Committee. Since 1995, adapted harvest management has been used to drive the frameworks for which seasons can be derived. AHM provides a set of 4 regulatory alternatives based on habitat, harvest, and population variables. And based on this year's breeding population estimate of 10.96 million mid-continental mallards and 3.89 million ponds counted in Prairie, Canada, the prescribed regulatory choice for the Central Flyway is the liberal alternative. And this entails outside dates that can be held between September 22nd and January 27th. Season lengths in our High Plains unit, the area west of 283, can be 97 days. However, the last 23 days may start no earlier than December 8th. In our Low Plains unit, which is the area east of 283 that contains 3 different zones, the early, late, and southeast can have 74 days. The duck bay limit is 6 ducks, however, there are some species and sex restrictions, such as 5 mallards, which no more can be 2 hens, 2 redheads, 3 wood ducks, 2 pintails, and 1 canvasback. It also establishes the bag limits for mergansers, and the states have the option of including the mergansers in the general bag limit. It provides a coot bag limit of a daily of 15 and 30 in possession, the shooting hours of 1/2 hour before sunrise to sunset, and also allows the zones that we spoke of earlier. And the High Plains cannot have any zones, however, the Low Plains can have 3 zones, each having 2 segments. The only change from last year is that the scalp limit jumps from 2 birds to 6 birds daily. Two youth waterfowl days were first offered in 1996 as to encourage greater youth participation and hence greater waterfowl youth recruitment. We can have 2 consecutive days per hunting zone and designated as youth days in addition to our regular duck season. They must be held outside any of the general duck seasons on a weekend or holiday or other non-school day when youth hunters have the maximum opportunity to participate. The days may be held within 14 days before or after any regular duck season framework or within any split. And the daily bag limit and shooting hours would be the same as for the general duck season. Youth must be 15 years and under to participate and have an adult of 18 years older accompanying them. However, the adults may not participate in waterfowl hunting. Moving on to staff recommendation for the 2012-13 duck season. It has topped the maximum federal frameworks for duck bag limits, possession limits, and shooting hours. Adopt a 74-day season in the Low Plains unit. Adopt a 96-day season length in the High Plains unit. The reason for the 1-day discrepancy is because of with the 9-day teal season and the 2-day youth season, and with the 96-day duck season, that brings us to the maximum of 107 days that's permitted by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And the recommended season dates for the falling zones are below. For the High Plains unit, the area west of 283 is October 6th to December 30th, and January 19th through January 27th. In the Low Plains early zone, this is our small wetlands, our shallow wetland complexes, such as Jamestown, Cheyenne Bottoms, have a season recommendation of October 6th to December 2nd, December 15th to December 30th. For the Low Plains unit, it would be October 27th to December 30th, and January 19th through January 27th. In the Low Plains Southeast Zone, which was created last year, will run from November 3rd to January 6th and from January 19th to January 27th. These recommendations are similar to what was for the 2011-2012 season, however, adjusting it accordingly for the calendar shift. The staff recommendations for the youth waterfowl days would be adopt maximum federal frameworks for daily bag limit, possession, and shooting hours. The recommended days for the High Plains unit and Low Plains early unit would be September 29th to September 30th. And the Low Plains late zone and Low Plains Southeast zone would be October 20th and 21st. Just a little bit of what goes into the development of the staff recommendation. An important tool in developing seasons is the use of human dimension surveys. As the hunters are the ultimate end users, a priority is placed on setting hunting season dates that match hunter preferences. In 2010, we surveyed over 75 hunters across the state to get feedback on zones and preferred opening dates before we implemented any zoning changes. This is also augmented by a number of public meetings held across the state. Presented here are 2 important questions from the 2010 survey relating to opening day. You can see there is a polarization among hunters, those who wanting early days versus those who prefer later opening days. And this relates to their type of hunting preference. With a little bit of technical difficulties here, this is a slide you've seen before, and basically Once we had a chance to hunters to experience the season, we resurveyed them where we targeted over 65 hunters of the southeast zone to solicit their input for the future season dates. A copy of the survey was handed out at the July meeting. When asked about the past 2011 season, it indicated that the timing of season for the east zone was about right, where about 47.6% stated so, with the second of being about 26 thought it was too early, and about 9% thought it was too late, and 18% had no opinion on the matter. The most direct and valuable question relating to the hunter's season date from this survey was question number 6, where we directly asked what would their preference be for the upcoming season. And as staff recommended, it would be from November 6th to January 6th and January 19th to January 27th, where nearly a third favoring this season framework. If you combine the options from the previous slide, it can be concluded that nearly 52% prefer an opening date of November 3rd. Survey results that hunters may prefer earlier November openers, but they also indicated some preference for more opportunity hunting in January when they were asked what day they prefer more days, and were nearly a 60-40 split. We also look at how the season dates would potentially affect hunting and hunter participation, where we plotted the number of hunters and harvests for the past seasons, 5 seasons at Marais Des Cygnes, and it was noted that it would be about a decrease of about 10% in the annual harvest and a decrease of about 12% in hunter participation if we shifted to a November 17th opening date. Similar for Neosho, however, with less results, where we would decrease harvest and hunter participation by 3%. And this is a comparison of what some of the neighboring states' season frameworks are. You notice that Missouri and Oklahoma season dates in the southeast, that borders the southeast zone, are nearly the same. Oklahoma just voted theirs yesterday with a November 3rd opener. Also note that Iowa, Missouri, and Arkansas only have 60 days to choose from, where here we have 74 days, so we're able to spread them out over a longer period. And Arkansas only has one zone across the state. This is a graph that has a lot of information, but if we break down the pieces, you can see it explains it fairly well. That waterfowl is steeped in traditions, but waterfowl management has always been on the forefront of wildlife sciences. And while we honor the past, we haven't always been confined by it. And this graph represents duck season openings and closings since 1961 and provides a greater explanation of the Kansas harvest than the season's end report that was distributed at the July meeting. The green bars are the number of opening days available for hunting, where we have a low of 39 to our present day 74-day framework. The shades are green and bars represent different duck zones. Prior to 1972, we had just one zone across the state. And from 1972 to 1996, we just had the high plains and low plains unit. And from 97 on till last year, we had the high plains, the low plains early, and low plains late. Then last year we had the high plains, low plains early, low plains late, and low plains southeast. And zoning has allowed us the greatest flexibility and for providing the greatest amount of opportunity. The blue lines are the opening days, and if you notice, have crept up from mid-October to early November for the southeast portion of Kansas. The red lines are the closing dates, which is also shifted later to match harvest opportunity with migration and landscape patterns, and consider the changes of agriculture and the creation of large reservoirs across the state since the 1950s and 60s. The red diamonds are the average date on the mellow harvest that was used in the season's ends report for comparisons. A few things that were not considered in the report were that in 2004, their season extensions was granted, where now we were able to have the season extend beyond the closing of January 20th, which was mandated before 2004, to be able to hold it to the last Sunday in January. So we notice that we've had longer season dates since that was not incorporated in the report. For example, in 1961, the first red dot on the left of the graph is the mallard harvest, which was about 40,000 ducks, compared to the 2008 harvest, which is about 114,000 mallards. Also note that mallard harvest is still skewed to the first half of the season, not the latter. The take-home message of this graph is the amount of opportunity we're currently able to provide. Moving season dates a week or so will not likely affect hunter satisfaction as much as when we drop to a moderate or restricted package with 60 and 39-day seasons. Combined with current waterfowl numbers, where this year we have a record 4.86 million ducks counted in the annual survey, and the expanded goose opportunities across the state, that these are truly the good old days of Kansas waterfowling. Moving on to geese, we have the federal frameworks that gives us the outside dates of between September 22nd and February 17th. And this is also same for the dark and light goose seasons. For the dark geese, we have the bag limit, have a 107-day season and a bag limit of 3. For white-fronted geese, we have 2 options. We can have a 74-day season with a 2-bird bag limit, or have a 88-day season with a 1-bird bag limit. And light geese is similar to Canada geese at 107 days. However, the daily bag limit is 20 with no possession limit. Staff recommendation is to adapt the maximum frameworks for season length, daily bag limits, possession limits, and shooting hours for dark and light geese, and to choose option A for white-fronted geese. Falconry, we have a pretty small falconry contingent in the state, probably less than 80 falconers. However, they're very passionate about their sport, and their regular season, falconry season, would follow the same as prescribed by staff recommendation for the general duck seasons. And they have the option of the extended falconry season that would run for February 25th, March 10th for all zones except for the High Plains unit, where we're already at 107 days restricted by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Again, these are similar to the 2011-2012 season, just adjusting for calendar dates. Staff recommendations are derived on sound principles of wildlife sciences that incorporate biological constraints of waterfowl species and the social aspect of the hunters. We've conducted large-scale surveys of hunters with the pre- and post-treatment of their season preferences. We compared those results to migration ecology, hunter participation, and harvest timing to develop these recommendations that will provide the greatest amount of opportunity for all waterfowlers. Kansas has a diverse waterfowling landscape and is a daunting task to create a package that works for all. In the past 15 years in Kansas, we enjoyed some of the longest seasons and highest bag limits for both ducks and geese. And with liberal in packages and zoning, we have the greatest means to satisfy the greatest array of constituents. With that, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, and I'll stand for questions.
Are there questions for Tom from the commission?
Option A, the 1 goose or the 2?
Option A is 2 goose or shorter season at 74 days, which would match our duck season. However, it'd give us 2 white-fronted geese. It'd be similar to what we've had for the past several years.
Further questions for Tom from the commission?
A couple, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Brodowski, when you looked at these neighboring states, did you look at Colorado?
Colorado dates for the eastern part of the state are on there. Let me get to that to give you those dates. For Colorado, the 2 adjoining zones would be from October 8th to December 4th and December 23rd to January 29th. And for their southeast part of the state of Colorado would be October 26th and January 29th. Remember, these are the 2011-2012 seasons, last year's past seasons.
And you think that those would be pretty close to the same this year?
I would imagine so. And those pretty much match up to our last year High Plains zones with an October starting date as well.
Is their southeast zone, that they consider that a low plains zone?
No, the area of the High Plains unit was created in 1961 to take advantage of under-harvested mallards. And so basically they set the line at approximately 100 parallel. So for Kansas, it's around west of 283, and similar through Nebraska and Oklahoma and Texas. It's a major highway near the closest to the 100th meridian.
One of the comments that the manager at the Neosho Wildlife area mentioned was that they shot a mixed bag of ducks for the first 2 weeks, then they shot mallards the rest of the season. Have you taken that into consideration?
Definitely, you notice that nearly at all of our wildlife refuges. Some of the landscape changes and the adaptability of the mallards, their wintering ecology is almost more, it sometimes can be similar to a goose, where they assemble in large flocks, maintain on large reservoirs, go out and egg filled feed. However, majority of our harvest is still in the earlier part of the month. That's mostly because that's when we also have the most hunters in the field. And, species like blue-winged teal, shovelers that are kind of and gadwall, which are kind of our 2 and 3 most harvested species, are earlier migrators. But just kind of the adaptability of the mallards have allowed them to take advantages of some of to hang around Kansas and some of the northern states longer.
Do you expect any freeze-up days in the southeast zone for this year?
I don't think I can forecast that. But
Are you saying you think it might be different than it was last season?
people, that's one of the responses I've had from people regarding the season, and it was reflected in the comments of the survey, is they noted last year was not a typical year. That, it was a warmer year, and whether that continues or not.
This is a warmer year than last.
Correct. And we also have facing some greater watering challenges on a lot of our areas as well.
Right. That's all I have right now, Mr. Chairman.
Are there other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I want to make sure that I'm understanding this, this graph that was handed out with the blue bars on it. We sent out 6,500 surveys, 60% response rate. So we had about 3,600 roughly responses. Am I tracking okay?
We had about 3,800 responses.
Okay.
However, that's how many sent the survey back.
Okay.
And if you go to the copy of the survey summary that was handed out in July, you'll get the actual number that commented on this specific question, which was I think it's just 200 or 1,800 people have responded to this specific question.
Okay. So out of the 3,800 responses back, if we look at the bottom of the sheet and it says that 48% were preferring a later opening date versus 52% for November the 3rd.
It's removing things like people that had selected other dates or had no opinion on the question. So this is it was requested to do a compressed version of the graph that was presented in July, removing those to take them out of the picture for just to not add complexity to this question.
Right. So that's about 1,900 for each grouping, correct?
Well, on this, only about 1,800 people answered this specific question on the survey.
Okay.
Total?
So about 900 and 900 then. Okay. So about half the people said last season in the southeast zone they wanted a later start date. About half of them said November 3rd was the correct start date based on that particular season.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Other discussion, other questions from the commission? We'll have a chance to have more. We're going to have some public comment too, I think.
Commissioner, she's talking.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Hello?
Hi, Deborah.
Sorry, that was my phone.
Did you have a question, Deborah?
Yeah, I did. I had asked, I was wondering why option G was left off the bar chart.
Option G was not presented during this survey. These are all Saturday openers. I think option G I don't have in front of me, actually calls for a Thursday opener. Is that correct? Well, November 15th, which would be a Thursday. This would allow us to have the full 74-day season. If we start on November 17th this year, we only will have a 72-day season. So
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So just in a nutshell, why did the department choose November 3rd rather than November 10th?
Well, one's November 10th would be a conflict with another popular opener with Upland Game. So that was one reason. However, just going with the survey data that, nearly a third of all that responded to this question preferred a season that started November 3rd.
At this time, if there are no more discussion right now from the commission, do we have some public comment who would like to come down and address the commission?
Are you talking about the low plains, or are you talking about just duck seasons in general?
Well, anything duck season in general.
Commissioners, my name is Chuck Carper from here in Great Bend, and I'm going to go on record. 3 years ago, we went before the commission when it was up in Hoisington and asked for you folks to move Cedar Bluff Reservoir into the Lake Plains. At that time, we were told that they could not do that because the federal government was involved and you couldn't change the zones but every 5 years. Then we were told that we would try to get Cedar Bluff into that zone. Last year, you folks agreed to do that, and then the federal government said we couldn't do that. So today, I'm going to come before you and ask that since we're in the early zone here, Cheyenne Bottoms, that we get a later opener rather than the proposal of the first week in October. Last year and years prior to that, we never had the influx of mallards here in our area till the last week into the year. Last year, on Thursday, before the end of the season, Wally, I think, where's Wally? Wally was actually out on some of his property, called some of his friends, and we had 3 of the greatest duck hunts we've had in years for 3 days. And then the season was over. We went back to the same property goose hunting 2 or 3 weeks later and had groups of 50, 60, 80 mallards decoying or goose decoys, and that's not a lot of fun, watching them fly away. I have emails in here that I have called on various friends of mine across the state. I've talked to some of the commissioners about it, and I personally would like to see the commissioners move the season back at least 2 weeks. If you give us a week, we'll take it. But the 1st of October, you know, there's nothing wrong with shooting teal and gadwall and shovelers, but that's kind of comparing eating goulash to a ribeye steak. You know, personally, I'd rather eat the ribeye, so give me the mallards later, and I'll take the teal and the gadwall if I have to shoot them. So I'm going to give this to you, Mr. Robert, if you wanted. Several emails, what have you in there. And I just think because of the, I don't know, weather conditions, whatever we've had in the last few years, where we have had the late migration of mallards, you said it earlier, sir, where they were staying on the big water. 2 weeks after we closed here, there was 100,000 mallards within 100 miles north of here, and that's on y'all's website. That was Cedar Bluff, Lake Wilson, Glen Elder, and Canopolis. 100,000 mallards 100 miles north of here. Something's got to change. You know, it's certainly not the commissioner's fault that they're hanging out on big water, but give us the opportunity to shoot them later in case they decide to slip south a little earlier. That's all I have to say.
You're your concern is in the low plains early?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, there's 2 issues there that he brought up. One being the timing of harvest. If you want to take Cheyenne Bottoms during the month of October, the weekly harvest is for last year was between 15 to 200 or 2,000 birds taken during October. Towards the end of December, you're looking less than 100 birds and less than 10 hunters per week on Cheyenne Bottoms. By moving the season back 2 dates, you're drastically reducing the number of hunters and harvest for Cheyenne Bottoms.
Why didn't they hunt Cheyenne Bottoms? Because it was froze up.
Correct, but I'm just saying,
It would have been open and we'd have had mallards here, they'd been hunters here.
I disagree. You know, places like Cheyenne Bottoms, this is, you know, mallards last year were 3rd in the total bags. You're behind things like blue-winged teal and shovelers. And so that brings up the other issue, which ties to that, is what is the hunter's preference? Is this someone that wants to go out and shoot 6 ducks, whether it's two mergansers Or is this someone that's a mallard purist where the only duck to him has a green head? And that's a second issue regarding for any of these zones is where you hunt. Not during the time you're hunting them, hopefully.
But regardless of that, punish, so we're gonna punish a few to let the many have what they want.
Correct.
That happens sometimes.
Just like the rest of them. You don't let them go out there and bust that ice and throw out the decoys or whatever. They
Part-
have the same opportunity we do.
Part of what we try to do is to accomplish an accommodation to the largest number of sportsmen, and the numerosity of the people affected has to weigh into this. And that's one of the problems we had in the discussion in Kansas City, was that on most years, ice is a factor. And as you begin to push that date further back, then you begin to have the opportunity to lose a lot of water. And a lot of people, the common man is forced to hunt free public hunting sometimes. And Cheyenne Bottoms may be the only opportunity that person has. He may not be able to lease the land. And we have to be somewhat mindful of everybody. And that's and when it comes to, nothing gets people more passionate than duck hunting. I've come to the conclusion. So I suspect we have more public comment. I appreciate your comments. Do we have somebody else that would like to speak? And the reason I realize I prefer you come down here because I want people to be able to hear, and I'd like you to state your name for the record, and it's just difficult for people out there in cyberland to hear if you don't speak close to the mic.
Great Bend, Kansas, Larry Fry is my name. I just have one very brief comment to make. Given the conditions across the state, and especially in the central part of the state, I'm wondering if season dates is not really a moot point. I've got a feeling it's not gonna make any difference when the dates are. We're gonna have the same amount of ducks, no matter when the openers are, when the closers are. And the same amount of huntable ducks, and I think that's gonna be, for all intents and purposes, zero. So as far as I'm concerned, you can set the dates anywhere you want. I don't think it's gonna affect anyone negatively or positively.
If we don't get some rain, you're probably right, but I think we're gonna have to set seasons.
Thank you.
Because if we didn't set seasons and it did rain, then we'd be in a doghouse. So I think we're gonna have to set seasons.
Well, I have no doubt you'll set some seasons.
When we looked.
I don't think you can make a mistake, though, tonight.
No, well, probably not. When we looked around today on a tour beforehand, it was not exactly upbeat when it was talking about water levels. Other comments from the public?
Commissioners, my name is Tom Loates. I'm from Overland Park, Kansas. And wasn't at the meeting last year with the whole discussion on the southeast zone. It seems like every year we have a cold year, then a hot year, and people show up and want to adjust the season date because of last year. Let's look at the historical data that the experts are prepared at all the different waterfowl areas across the state and let them make the decision. I mean, that's a simple deal. I mean, they've got master's degrees in waterfowl biology. We are passionate about our sport, yep, and I like teal. That's it, thank you.
Thank you.
Other public comment?
I'm Wally Eldridge from Great Bend, and I asked this exact same question last year, and I don't remember because I'm getting old and I've got a bad memory. The zones right now, I don't know if it's possible to pull up a map, but it goes in a circle around Cheyenne Bottoms. You can drive 5 miles north of here, 5 miles south of here, and you can hunt ducks, I believe, 2 weeks later. And I still don't understand, ducks migrate generally north and south. I don't understand why there's a circle around Cheyenne Bottoms.
Sure, and you're correct. The ducks have to come from the north to get to the south. It's based off of habitat types. The map, and I have one here.
But what I'm saying is the same duck that comes off of Cheyenne Bottoms, he flies to a cornfield 5 miles south and we can shoot him. And you can't hear, and that's the same duck going north and south.
Sure, it's the same duck, but however, if you're a hunter that are hunting on Cheyenne Bottoms, you hunt that particular habitat when it's freeze updates, what ducks it attract. Cheyenne Bottoms is a relatively shallow thing, less than a foot in most places, and it caters to the dabbling ducks, the teal, the gadwall, and if you're targeting mallards, later in the year, that may travel a lot more further to feed or take advantages of things like open water or agricultural residue, but still, it's based off of those habitat types. That's why we go around the large reservoirs to make sure they're in the late zone. We make sure McPherson's included in the early zone as well as Jamestown, and that's why you see those boundaries running like that.
More comments from the public?
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of reference, even if we wanted to, we couldn't change that right now anyway, could we?
Correct. No, in the state, as I mentioned earlier, we have 2 units, the High Plains unit and Low Plains unit. And it's just the zoning of the Low Plains unit that is, we're confined to for the next 4 hunting seasons. So we cannot change any of the zones in the southeast part of the state. The High Plains zone is something that we've, the last 2 years, have petitioned the flyway on for the addition of Cedar Bluff. It's probably something that I'll bring up continuously to the flyway to discuss at the Service Regulation Committee, probably for most of my career, either till we wear them down or they wear me out.
Any more comments from the public? You hunt ducks?
I can probably speak loud enough right here, but, on the duck, on this map, I can't tell, at McPherson Wetlands, one part of it, and then clear you get up to, I can't think of the little town.
Inman?
But the wetlands in the north, there's part of it in one zone and the other. And I don't know why you can't go for 5 miles and hit the other.
In the rezoning for last year, now all McPherson Wetland Complex is all in the Low Plains early zone now. So that was something we were able to change with last year's Jones changes.
It's changed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I know they've got water.
Any other comments from the public?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if there's no more comments from the public, and I don't know if we have any more from the commission or not, I've got this data that's been compiled over the years is like a lot of data. It's something, it can be moved one way or another pretty easily. The reason you don't see the harvest numbers in January, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, is because typically most of these zones are closed half of January. So you're only hunting 2 weeks.
Correct. You cannot count.
Yeah, you can't count the days when you're not hunting the birds. So your harvest numbers, we don't have data to know if we can shoot the ducks in January.
No, but we do have a telling off trend for a lot of those, and like for Marais Des Cygnes, telling off through December.
Right. I guess what I'm saying, we don't have what you're hanging your hat on, which is statistical data, because the season's closed. I would like to make a motion that we adopt option G for several reasons. One being the one I just mentioned. Second, it does not conflict with the pheasant opener. Third, the lack of water this year, as the other gentleman stated, at best, we may as well wait until there's an opportunity. And I'm only speaking about this as option G for the southeast zone. I know some of these other people want to do it in their zones. I'm going to defer to the commissioners in their zones to modify that if they'd wish. We're also in a weather pattern here that none of us can predict. That's correct. But traditionally, we all know these droughts, these floods, these colds, these snows, they move across the country from region to region. Texas had it last year. Southern Oklahoma had it last year. We got it this year. We had 60 days, 70 days of 100+ temperature. We haven't had any rain. I've talked with the Department of Ag and the Department of Water Rights. Specifically at Neosho, it's going to take about 11 inches of rain in that basin before we can really pump with any substance. You might be able to pump for 24 hours, but we all know that's not going to get us anything. So with that, I'd like a motion that we approve the southeast zone with option G, and we take the staff recommendations on the rest of it in the waterfowl season.
I suggest that maybe another option would be to start and try to have the staff recommendation be voted up or down, and if it's voted down, then I think we should try to go for other options. I'm not sure that a Thursday opener in duck season makes a lot of sense to me, but as we're going to find out, I only have one vote. But that would be my suggestion, that we vote up and down to start with.
Well, why don't we see if we can get a second on my motion first, Mr. Chairman, then we'll see if we can get one on yours.
Well, okay, but as chairman, I'm going to still have some more discussion.
Okay.
Anyway, that's my recommendation, and I suppose you can make a motion however you want, but I might have some other comments. I think the documents that have been provided by Tom and others from the department are actually provided to us with some thought and in good faith. I don't believe they've struck the, pulled the numbers around to satisfy themselves to the extent they may even have an opinion. I think what they're trying to do is deal what's in the best interest of the majority of Kansans, not just a few. We have in the southeast zone, we have 3 fairly large areas, all of which that may have there is no precise science, but they are the Flint Hills, the Neosho, and the Marais Des Cygnes, all of which probably have about 3,800 man trips throughout the season. And 2 of those are dramatically affected by average weather patterns. And while it's true, last year was an unusual year. We didn't have any freeze up at a lot of places, although you did notice it froze up out here. For us to set the season for the sole purpose of providing a preferred benefit to the Neosho group, we have 2 other sizable areas that have nearly equal participation that may not be able to have as many days to hunt. Statistics were kind of surprising to me that the number of mallards and the ducks harvested in the early season, I think logic dictates that there is still significant hunting opportunity in the early periods of time, but if you take that away, there is only one particular group that may benefit, and it's to the detriment of a lot of the people in the northern part of that zone. And I think that there are 48% of the hunters that say that they would like to have something other than November 3rd, but 52% listed that. And I think that's a significant number. Now, I only have one vote, and Don, I understand where you're coming from, and this meeting got to be quite contentious in Kansas City, and you can make whatever motion you want, and we'll see whether it passes. I still think my preference is to first try to vote on what the staff has recommended, And if that fails, then we'll look at some other options. Because I think that if there is a presumption that that the staff recommendation would fail, I think I would like to have a little more input before we decide to go clear to the Thursday of the 15th, when we could also have a compromise of some splits and make some modest accommodation to the early migrant hunters and the people who may have traditional freeze up. There are some other options that still are better than option G. Now, that's my opinion. You've made the motion, and if you get a second, then we'll see what happens. So there's been a motion made to bypass staff recommendation and jump right to item G, which is a Thursday opener from November 15th to January 27th. Do I hear a second?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question about your procedure here? Or do you have to have a second or no second at this point?
Well, I mean, I don't know if staff council may. I don't know if I'm necessarily in a position to where I can dictate the order in which we have things done. My suggestion was to first see if the staff recommendation would pass, and if it didn't pass, then we'd try to choose another alternative. And we have lots of alternatives, and I mean, I suppose we could have a second. I'm not exactly sure what to do.
Mr. Chairman, I was
Answer his
noticing,
question first.
could I just
do that?
offer up a suggestion? Maybe just get a feel for the 6 people. No, Deborah's here, 7. If they want to vote on the original staff recommendations, or if they want to just go with the motion that's been put out on the floor at this point.
Well,
Could I get you all to move closer to your microphone so they don't have to turn it up? We keep getting a lot of feedback.
okay. Have you followed what's going on so far, Deborah?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
Mr. Chairman, I think Robert's Rule of Order would state that if there's a second, we have to deal with it.
I think that's probably true.
And if there's not a second, then we'll move on.
Mr. Chairman, and if there isn't a second at this, when you have a motion to adopt, there can be a motion at that point to an amendment made, and then having the second to that amendment then. So we can actually still go ahead and have the rest of the discussion, call the question on staff recommendations. At that point, there can be a motion to amend and insert whichever one of those you want. And if there's a second, then we'll vote on that amendment first and then the other motion.
Tell me what we want to accomplish. We know what staff recommendation is, and my motion would be to amend that with option G. If we want to have discussion on that, I'll certainly have discussion on that. But if we put another step in, let's vote whether or not we want staff recommendation or not first, I mean, we're almost essentially we're going to accept staff's recommendation on everything except for the southeast zone and amend the southeast zone with option G. And if anyone wants to discuss that, I will be happy to discuss that.
Well, I think option G isn't fair to the people who don't hunt in the extreme southeast part of the southeast zone. I think it puts too many days at the tail end of the season and not enough days at the front end to benefit the people that hunt early migrants and the people who hunt areas that may freeze up.
Mr. Chairman, when the department made application for the southeast zone for the sole purpose of creating later seasons.
Which is the reason the season is now recommended at November 3rd rather than earlier in October, which was the traditional season. And that's why it's November 3rd rather than October, is so that we could have a later season. As I remember, the last, before we moved to November 3rd with the late season, the early zone had an opening in late October, maybe the last Saturday in October, and prior to that, it used to be the third Saturday in October. So what we have done when we opened the late season, we extended, delayed the opening date by an extra week.
And Mr. Chairman, I know that me and you disagree on this particular issue. I understand that. The only thing that I want everyone to understand is I do hunt a lot in the southeast zone. If I thought for 1 minute, and when I say a lot, people, I hunted 63 days last year in the southeast zone. If I thought it would be detrimental to the harvesting of ducks in the southeast zone by creating these days, do you think I would, for any reason at all, propose this?
Well, there are a lot of people who would just as passionately say that they would rather have an earlier opener because they hunt the Marais Des Cygnes location, and they have just as much of a passionate opinion, Don, that moving it to that date is absolutely detrimental to them.
Right. But Mr. Chairman, here's what I think the point that a lot of us are missing is we did what staff recommended last year. We had the season they recommended last year. We're not going to know, this southeast zone is for a trial period of 5 years. If we don't move these season dates around to see if those 2 weeks in January, we can, what the harvest totals are, and we start including that in our data, how are we going to know what we've accomplished, if the southeast zone is a success, and if truly, I don't think there's anybody in this room that'll disagree with me that our weather patterns have changed.
But
hell, the USDA has changed our planting seasons in the northern part, middle part of the state of Kansas to a different zone. If I thought that this was detrimental to the harvesting of ducks, if we want good weather to hunt ducks, we should open a duck season in October. If we want to shoot ducks and harvest ducks and get the hunters to have a better success rate in the southeast zone, we need to open it later. It's just that simple. It's not, have you ever hunted in the southeast zone, Commissioner? Or Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I'm born and raised in the southeast zone.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I own property in the southeast zone.
Okay.
And I'm familiar, but it's on Highway 54. And most of the time, when you're wanting to be able to have ducks because you know it's not detrimental to anybody else, the water's frozen up on most of the places where I would be able to hunt. The ponds are frozen. And yes, pond hunters are sometimes a second-class group of citizens, but I think that most areas, as you get further north in the southeast zone, even hell, this goes clear up to I-35. And there's a lot of people that hunt, and there's a lot of opportunity. And there are 2 large waterfowl areas that do freeze up, and they do freeze up regularly, that are in that southeast zone. And the only one where there seems to be any benefit are those people that hunt in the Osho. And I said before, what I wish we could do is draw a circle around the Osho and have that the southeast zone, and then everybody else in the eastern part of the state would be able to hunt it in an area that more suits traditional weather patterns.
But
now,
Mr.
you're right.
Chairman,
You may find that the weather is getting so we may not have ice anymore. But the year before last, I ice fished probably 2 or 3 weeks. So it's not like we've had an established concept of we're not going to have any ice, and we're not going to have normal freezing. And if you're trying to use statistics, you don't keep moving your opening date around, and you'll never will get statistics that give you anything because you keep changing your frame of reference all the time. That's my opinion.
Well, Mr. Chairman, see, you keep blaming this on the Neosho guys. Well, at the last meeting, we had people from the Marais Des Cygnes Valley that were here speaking in favor of a later season. We've never had anybody that's spoken one way or another from either, from Jamestown, I think it is, that's in the southeast zone.
Jamestown isn't in the southeast zone.
What is it that's in the southeast zone?
Marais Des Cygnes, Neosho.
No, there's another wildlife area in the southeast zone. What is it, Tom?
We get the Flint Hills Refuge.
Flint Hills, Flint Hills. We've never had an opinion one way or another from them. Once again, Mr. Chairman, me and you are going to disagree with this. What I'd like to know is if I can get a second on the option G, we'll vote on it. If we don't, somebody else can make another motion and we'll vote on that. But there's a motion on the floor and we're either going to get a second or we're not.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Okay. Procedurally, I would ask that you withdraw your your motion. Then we'll treat this just like a regulation. We usually don't do that for these, but we'll have a motion and a second, and then you can make your motion to amend to put your southeast zone dates in. Okay, just to clarify.
I
So
don't understand what you're telling me.
we're going to treat it just like an amendment to a regulation. So we'll have a motion and a second to adopt a staff recommendation. Then you can make your motion, and if there's a second, to change the southeast zone dates. So it's specific and limited to that, a motion to amend only for that zone.
Chris, wouldn't we want to vote up or down on the staff recommendations first if it gets?
No.
We're going to
You don't have to
just
vote
bring
it
it
up.
forward to a motion and a second to bring it forward to vote, and then we'll make a motion to amend.
Well, you're assuming we're going to approve it and then go with the amendment, though.
Right. What if it fails?
No,
Chris?
you're not
If
saying
the-
that.
What if it fails?
If the motion to,
Staff recommendation fails, period.
No.
Up or down vote.
we're going to have, we're going to bring the base forward.
What do you mean you don't do
And
that?
then
All
we'll
you
take
do
an
is bring
amendment.
forward a
Sheila.
motion and
Hold
a
on.
second.
Sheila,
At what point do you vote?
we're going to treat it just like an amendment. We're going to bring the amendment that's proposed forward. We're going to treat the base recommendation as our regulation. And then we'll have a motion to amend. Don can make his motion to amend at that point. If there's a second, then we'll have discussion, if there's any more discussion, and then there'll be a vote on that motion to amend. Okay? And then we'll have another vote on the whole package.
I'm gonna simplify this. I'll withdraw my motion, but before somebody jumps in here, I'm gonna make a motion to approve staff recommendations by amending. No?
Just a motion to amend, or motion to vote on staff recommendation.
Two parts. We'll
Right.
do the motion and I will make the motion, so we can set this in place. I'll make the motion that we accept staff recommendations on the season dates. If someone seconds that, then at that point we'll have discussion, but that is also the time for the motion to amend to change.
After the second or before the second?
After the second.
Before the vote.
It's before a vote. There's no vote
There's
yet.
no vote.
So you're not going to vote up or down on the recommendations without an amendment?
Right.
Correct.
Well,
If it goes, yes.
So
Okay. I withdraw everything I've got on the table.
Okay.
All my motions.
So I move to accept staff recommendations.
I have to say something. Let the younger people do it. Hey, I'm a woman, and he knows my grandson, Casey Everett. And let them younger fellas, their ducks in their fathers, you know. I still hunt ducks and geese, but I can't stand that cold.
Mr. Chairman, I made a motion.
I have to
Okay.
speak early,
I'll second it.
okay?
all right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. And before we go any further, we have some amendments. Or I assume that Don is now going to amend. And Don, you make a motion that we amend and insert possible dates for the southeast season number G.
I would like to make a motion to amend staff recommendation for the southeast zone to remove the recommendation of A and replace it with option G of November 15th through January the 27th.
All right. Do we have a second?
I second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Now we have some discussion on the amendment. My first discussion is if we're going to have to avoid and not deal with staff recommendations, personally, I think item B has a bit more fair play than G.
B as in boy, Mr. Chairman.
B as in boy. At least get 2 weeks of an opener in the early part so that the people who don't hunt in the Neosho area will be able to have at least 3 days or 2 more days, and we avoid having a Thursday opener and have a Saturday opener for the 17th. It basically takes away 2 days of this amendment. I personally think that the staff recommendations are the most fair.
Mr. Chairman, would you say that one more time for me? And I don't mean to interrupt you, but I always do, so.
You mean which? That I think that the staff recommendations are the most fair, or that I think that item B is more fair to people who hunt throughout the southeast zone, that item B is more fair than item G?
How about if I do this, Mr. Chairman? What if I withdraw my amendment and you go ahead and make the motion to make it item B?
What is item B? Item B is November 3rd and 4th, and November 17th through the 27th, as compared to a straight season of November 15th to the 27th. Well, because I'm going to support, to start with, all due respect, I hope that your amendment doesn't pass.
Okay.
And if it passes, and if it doesn't pass, then I'm hoping that number B might go ahead and pass, because I don't know how to parliamentarily.
Do you play poker?
I call the question on the amendment.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Has a 13-day split in it.
We can have a split.
No, he called for the question. Rodney?
I know. I have a question about item B. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That would look okay, but could you, instead of November 17th on item B, could you put November 15th? Because my question is, what's the matter with a Thursday opener?
Because we don't have enough days. We only get like 74 days, and Dawn's amendment puts everything everything as late as possible. And where I'm saying give up the November 16th and 15th so that we can at a minimum have November 3rd and 4th for some people to hunt some early migrants. And we don't have the option of having November 3rd and 4th and November 15th, because that would be more days than the Fish and Wildlife Service would allow us to have. We can have a split. Our recommendation from staff was a split.
And why was that?
Our split was originally, staff recommendations were from November 3rd to January 6th, and then a split from January 6th to January 17th through the 27th. Dawn's amendment was to have the Low Plains Southeast Zone have only a season from November 15th to January 27th.
No split.
And no split, just a straight season. I'm saying that while I don't like it as well, I think that item B, which is November 3rd and 4th and November 17th through the 27th, probably makes a a little more of an attempt to accommodate the rest of the hunters in the southeast zone.
Are you willing to make that motion?
All right. We need to vote the amendment, I guess. So hopefully the amendment won't pass, and if we're still inclined to do something else, we'll go to B.
And we're
Let's call the
gonna,
question.
we're gonna vote right now on my motion.
I would like the amendment restated, please.
My motion, Deborah, was for option G to be amended for the southeast zone.
Okay, say it again, you cut out.
I made the motion and Robert seconded it for option G for the southeast zone.
And G is November 15th through the 27th, a Thursday opener, no splits.
Roll call.
Let's have,
Public comment on that again?
I really don't
We
know.
had public comment on everything but falconry. Every option on falconry was public comment. Why don't we use public comment on this?
When the question's called, it needs to be voted. When the question's been called, it needs to be voted. And the question was called.
Okay, explain that to me. I'm not understanding what's going on here. There's cross communication. I'm not clear.
Parliamentary procedure is as such that, you know, we have the amendment was made, and then we've had some discussion. When someone says, I call for the question, there's no further discussion, the vote will be taken. So the vote to be taken on the amendment needs to be done now.
I think that's right.
Just on the amendment.
This is on the
Not
amendment.
Just on the amendment.
The rest of it. And there can still be more comment
There's
after
to be more
that.
discussion on the other and possibly another amendment.
If
So
this amendment fails.
If this amendment fails, not only possibly, probably, because I'm going to do another one, so.
Call the question.
I'm clear.
All right, call the question.
Commissioner Bolton?
Are we voting on option G?
In southeast zone only, yes.
Okay, yes.
Commissioner Bud?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
No.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
No.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes?
Commissioner Lauber?
No.
Pass 4-3.
There's no public comment?
You're still open to amendment. Come on, any of the other amendments that you want to discuss.
But how many amendments can we have?
So we're done.
Keep going.
We had 7 more than we had last meeting.
Go ahead, come down, please.
We still haven't addressed.
I guess I'm kind of lost at even where to start. Here we've got the recommendation from the waterfowl managers across the state, right? There are several of them in this room that have recommended the 3rd of November. Okay? There's 4 major waterfowl areas in the north portion of the southeast zone. You got Flint Hills National Wildlife Refuge. You've got John Redmond. You've got Hillsdale, which in a normal year hunts a lot of people. Last year, the manager was retired and never refilled that spot, but there's at least 2,000 or 3,000 people that hunt that every year in the Meredithine Wildlife Area. That's 4 major areas. El Dorado Reservoir is another one up north. Okay? Now we've got some commissioners that have gotten together, and they've got a group that they hunt down in southeast Kansas, and they're going to dictate where the majority of the hunters in the state want to hunt, the dates, where the professionals say, these are the dates we want to hunt.
Where did you get that information?
It's right here tonight.
You can't substantiate any of that.
Sure I can.
No, you can't.
Yeah, right there, he just said it. They recommend those dates.
You just accused us of getting together behind somebody's back and making a recommendation on this southeast zone.
No.
Do you have anything to substantiate that?
Right there's the man. He told me tonight. This is the only information I've gathered is tonight here.
Well, you're the guy that just questioned that, though.
I am. I'm just saying there's 4 major waterfowl areas in the state of Kansas in the southeast zone that hunt a lot more than Neosho and that southeast zone, the southern portion of the southeast zone. Where it was messed up was the dividing hunt should have been 54 or 400 rows.
You should have never been in that zone. If you're hunting.
Absolutely. We should have never been in the southeast zone.
But none of your people were here to give
I
us
didn't know
that
it was going to
info.
happen. Nobody knew it was going to happen. There were some guys from the southeast zone that showed up, ramrodded it through, and that was done.
That's not true.
Well, then okay, maybe I'm being ignorant because I didn't know what was going on.
Well, that's possible, but you guys never showed up for any of that.
Well, I don't.
And the director.
Was there public comment brought out for that?
Oh, yeah.
There were people from your side too,
Okay.
and I heard them.
When was it, Mr. Chairman?
There were the guys that came in who hunt Marais Des Cygnes at
At
Cabela's.
Cabela's. But where before that? 2 years before that?
Well, I don't know.
Where were they at?
The only person we've ever had before, there was a couple of guys, one guy is a professional hunter from wildlife, who last year came up here and said that he brings in all this money to the Pittsburgh area. And that's the only person that's ever come up and never said anything until probably 3 meetings ago. You know, and that was it. And there was nobody else that ever came. And I can't remember whoever the guy's name was. And he's the one that referred to non-mallards as silly ducks. And that he only hunts public hunting, or he hunts public hunting and for himself, but saves his good stuff for his guests. And he was here at this meeting, and then we didn't have any more discussion on any of this until we got into some discussion at the meeting before, and then at Cabela's, it got very contentious and we ran out of time.
Way before that, when Mike Hayden was secretary, and we first started talking about this, and his comment was he did not understand why there weren't people here talking about this southeast zone because it was monumental waterfowl legislation. And that came from him. It's been that far back. And I had the same
92.
question. Nobody was here.
That was in 92, wasn't it?
Mr. Chairman?
No.
Yeah.
I have a question for Tom.
Yes.
No, this, the other Tom.
Sorry.
Are you,
Tom also.
sorry,
Yep.
are you completed?
Yep.
My question for Tom is, since we have an amendment that passed, we haven't voted on the final, but memory tells me we're going through the presentation, and we're talking about youth days can be up to 14 days. So do we need to amend the special youth waterfowl to make it within 14 days for the southeast zone? Because your recommendation is October 20th, 21st, but if it has to be in a 14-day window, then we need to change that.
I would have to check with our, the feds to see if it's just within any of our seasons or it has to be within 14 days of that particular opening day.
Yeah, because I got the interpretation when you said that, it could be no more than 14 days prior.
I would believe so, but I would have to go back to the Federal Register for the exact wording. So I would think the youth day would have to be moved up where it's still within that 14 days.
So that's my point.
Correct. It'd have
If
to
we
be-
pass this, and if that's the case,
It would more likely be on, well, depending on what the final thing, it would be a Saturday and a Sunday with that, or it could be put in within the split. But if there's no split, I guess you can do that. Or you can hold it with after the season, but that can also be detrimental to it, as in, you know.
well, I don't see it as a problem. I just want to make sure I do it correctly. So if I need to make an amendment to that piece so that we have that within 14 days, I'd rather do that now.
Correct.
So we would be talking the 3rd and 4th, okay?
Just for that.
For this.
That particular zone.
Just the spatial youth in the low plains southeast zone.
Thank you for catching that.
So with that being the case, does everybody understand where I was going with that? I would go ahead and make an amendment to the staff's recommendations for the low plains southeast zone for the youth to be November 3rd and 4th.
Second.
Okay, do we have any discussion on that? Basically, now we have a motion with one amendment to change the date from the 15th through the 27th. And now we have another amendment that has been moved and seconded to now adjust the youth season from the 3rd to November 3rd and 4th. Any questions on the amendment for the youth season?
Call for the question.
Commissioner Bolton?
I have a question. Sorry. Now, I missed part of that because it's going in and out. We're now voting for a separate season for youth.
Well, Deborah, the staff recommendation is, the question is that it needs to be within 14 days. We're not exactly sure specifically the federal regulations, but that's what we had done. So if we were to pass, which is now amended with the other for the southeast zone, I want to make sure that the youth dates would be within that 14-day window so we don't have a problem. So my motion was to move just for the youth dates in the southeast zone to the 3rd and 4th, because that would put them within the 14-day window we would need.
Okay, yes.
Commissioner Bud?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawler?
Yes.
7-0.
Well, we might as well see if this motion will pass now. Huh? Yeah, we'll have some discussion, because we have a motion now with the amendment. We have to see whether the motion with the amendment is going to pass. The option is, if it doesn't pass, we can try to get another amendment. That may or may not do anything. Does anybody have any public comment on this? Be my guest if you want.
I'm done. You know,
Mike?
can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, I understand Commissioner Bud's reasoning and Wilson. Randy, a lot of my readers are in your area, and a lot of them hunt El Dorado and through there. I'm curious to why you backed the ultra late season.
Yeah, Mike, that's a good question. And my reasoning for this is I don't know anybody in the southeast zone that hunts like these two guys do.
175 days last year, so
Okay, I know one.
101 too many.
I know one.
multiple states.
And it seems just from just being a duck hunter, you want to go hunting when the ducks are there, not because the season is there. And it's just reasonable common sense to me that you could scoot this southeast zone back a little bit to try and see if this is going to increase late season harvest and hunter participation.
Did you speak with any duck hunters within your region, Will Carpenter, or any of those guys?
No, I did not.
There's a difference between El Dorado and these guys are hunting a very special
Yeah.
situation, and I totally understand
Yeah.
why they did what they did. Like you said, that's the whole reason you have the southeast zone. And the main push for the southeast zone was extreme southeast. I believe you were involved in it for quite a while. And I talk to Roy Carter every year. You do get the ducks a lot later down there. But this is a big unit, and as Robert has said many times, the crime of this is the boundary, which can't be changed right now. But
But Mike, I wasn't finished with that. Let me finish. If you look at the survey results we just got right here, about half the people surveyed last year said they wanted a later season, a later date. About half said, let's leave it the same. It's half and half. Combine that with just the general concept that you want to hunt when ducks are flying, the ducks come later in this southeast zone. And I've not had the conversations that these guys had with hunters down there. I'm going off of those two things. Hunter survey, half of them want it, half of them don't. And just the general kind of common sense that these ducks come later. So why wouldn't you shift your season later to take advantage of hunting more ducks? Why would you open the season up early when the ducks were not there?
Is El Dorado in the southeast zone? Because we've never heard anything from anybody. It is.
Yeah,
This has been contentious. This meeting last year would have been my first meeting, but I wasn't here.
I remember Robert and I discussing both.
Right. So if we've had a year to deal with this, I've had hundreds and hundreds of conversations with the guys from the Marais Des Cygnes Valley, the guys from the Osho. I've never had one phone call from anybody from El Dorado. I've never had one phone call from anywhere else in that zone. It's Marais Des Cygnes and the Osho, and I'm going to tell you, there's a very passionate part of Marais Des Cygnes and a very traditional part of Marais Des Cygnes that have legitimate reasoning. Michael, I think the biggest thing that we don't know, and I'm going to keep saying this, is we have no statistics to tell us if we can shoot ducks in January because we're only open half of it. We're going to get it this year. And if it's a bust, you know what we're going to do next year? We're going to modify it because we've got 5 years to make this zone work. Because in 5 years, the feds may say you don't have a zone anymore. Am I right, Tom?
No, this is not an experimental zone.
Well, they told me it was a 5-year zone.
It was 5 years before we can change frameworks again.
We can't ask to have it changed
Correct.
until 5 years after. We can't go in and ask for the zone
Well,
to be changed all the time.
Faye is the one who told me that, so maybe she gave me wrong information. But I'd like to make a motion now to move that
We already have a motion on the floor.
What is it?
It's proper to make an amendment at this point. He can still
Okay.
amend the underlying.
Yeah.
I have a question for Mr. Groski. Does your data, historical data show that the ducks arrive later in the southeast corner of the state than they do in the rest of the state?
No, I would reflect to Monty and Carl and back that, that it depends what ducks you're targeting and how you're targeting them. If you're hunting a flooded or a plant and flood field, you're going to get mallards in. If you're hunting moist soil environment, you're more likely getting teal and other species in. It's what ducks are you targeting or when they're there. Our traditional migration is still around the Thanksgiving, is still peak for Neosho as well as Marais Des Cygnes.
So you're saying certain species of ducks arrive later in that corner than the rest of the state?
Correct, but still half of our mallard harvest is still, or the average of our mallard harvest is still towards that early, around the Thanksgiving time area. I mean, it's kind of a mixed perception that our ducks
Well,
don't get here at this time. Our ducks
yeah,
are
we're-
here.
The chair is suffering from paralysis from time to time, trying to figure out what the heck to do next. Let's have some discussion, but then we have to get,
Let's leave the southeast zone, if it's not an experimental zone, let's collect data for 5 years, see what happens at the end of 5, and then in 4 more years, when we can change the zone or change the date, let's change it then.
If you want out in 5 years and the majority of the Marais Des Cygnes Valley wants out in that 5-year period, I'll be your biggest advocate. I mean, I'm just telling you, it's about harvesting the ducks and the end user getting the best opportunity that he can. I'm not against anybody. I'm for everybody.
all right.
One more thing. Obviously, our seasons, our weather has changed. Coming to these meetings year after year, and it isn't just in the southeast zone, it's across the whole state. What I've seen is everybody says the same thing, a later date. So,
And where are you from? You were from Great Bend.
Okay.
it doesn't matter where
You had did you have another amendment, Don?
I don't know what I don't know what motion's on. Oh, Tom's motion's on the floor. Is that
Well,
correct?
what's actually on the floor is the motion for the staff recommendation that has now been changed for the southeast zone by your amendment, which passed, by my amendment for the youth that passed. If we now vote yes, it's done. If we vote no, we go back to the table.
Another motion to amend is in order as well. That was what your question was, wasn't it? You were gonna make a
Yeah,
motion
I'm a
to.
little confused about your other amendment.
we vote on 2 amendments?
No,
The amendments are passed.
Amendments have already passed.
we're going to vote right now on.
If there are 7 yes vote, or a majority of the votes with yes, it's over.
Call for the question.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Bolton?
I'm sorry, I need you to repeat that. You keep cutting in and out, so what are we voting on?
The motion as amended, with those two amendments.
Yes.
Commissioner Budd?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lawson?
No.
Pass 6-1 to include the amendment.
That's that. Okay. I think that's all the business that we have. Do we have all the next meeting dates and everything?
We made, yeah, we need to make January, we don't, January 10th, I guess we do have January 10th.
Is that El Dorado?
Yeah, January 10th is El Dorado.
That's the next one?
No,
No.
October 18th is the
18th.
next one.
Flint Oak.
At Flint Oaks.
And then what was that for October 18th?
January 10th at El Dorado at Butler County Community College.
For Grizzlies.
And I'm suggesting March 21st.
You need a location or the date?
It's in Topeka. It'll be
In Topeka.
our March meeting's Topeka typically.
What, we've got a meeting in October, and then,
October.
but then when's after October?
January 10th
January 10th? Where's that at?
in El Dorado.
Okay.
And then March 21st in Topeka. If you agree on March 21st, that's what Chris is asking.
Yeah, that's fine. Can we tentatively agree and all? Well, let's just agree. Okay, we'll agree.
All right, do we have anything more this evening?
March 21st, right?
March 21st. All right, well, thank you all for coming. Appreciate your time. Have a good evening.